Good afternoon. It's Wednesday. It's just gone 4 o'clock, and this is the Alex Salmond phone-in on LBC. I'm here every week, taking your calls with Ian Dale. So if you have a burning question, this is your chance. Cameron's declaration, learn English or we'll kick you out. The act of a statesman, or is the Prime Minister unhinged? Trump and Palin, the dynamic duo, or the kiss of death for the Donald Trump campaign? Real employment in the UK and in Scotland at record highs, but storm clouds gathering internationally. You can ask absolutely anything, within reason, of course. To get in touch, you can call me on 0345 6060 973 or text on 84850 or email alec@lbc.co.uk. You can watch us live on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk. So that's the Alex Salmond phone-in every Wednesday afternoon from 4, only on LBC, leading Britain's conversation.
Alex, welcome back.
Yeah, great to be here, Ian.
Number 2 here. Now, how have the reviews been in the Scottish press? I've been reading Ruth Davidson, the Scottish Tory leader. She's got a few sort of backhanded compliments.
Oh, no, I think from Ruth, I think that was high praise. Indeed, that's the nicest thing she's ever said about me. I think you had a wee influence in that one.
I certainly did not. She says, it turns out the old adage about all politicians' careers ending in failure doesn't hold true. Some just end up doing phone-ins on LBC radio. That's what I meant by backhanded.
Well, I don't know. I think isn't there a difference between a has-been and never was?
Has been, never was. Right, lbc.co.uk if you'd like to watch us as well. Who's the first caller?
The first caller we've got is Tina in Wimbledon. On you go, Tina.
Hello, good afternoon, gentlemen. Hello, Alex, and hello, Ian.
Hi.
This is a first-time caller. Before I ask a question to Alex, I would like a little bit of audience, if you could allow me to elaborate on what I'm going to be asking and why, with my experiences.
Well, keep it as brief as you can, Tina, because we've only got half an hour.
Okay, I'll be as quick as I can. I agree with David Cameron regarding the ban on fully covered face niqab. And I would like to ask Alex whether he would implement that ban in Scotland.
Well, I'm not First Minister anymore, Tina, but if I were, no, I wouldn't. And I don't think Nicola Sturgeon will be doing either. I mean, as you're right, the niqab is the full face covering. The hijab, of course, is the headscarf. My view is folks should wear what they like, and I don't think we should have a problem with that.
Well, I have a problem, and I'm sure there's a lot of British society would have that problem because, first of all, it's security is the issue. Here, I do not want to be sitting next to, on the tube, on the underground, with a fully face covered person who I don't even know whether it's a male or a female, or whether he's got a bomb belt under his niqab.
Oh, I think we can. That? Well, I mean, in terms of bomb belts, Tina, I mean, somebody could have a bomb belt under their overcoat. And as far as people wearing the niqab is concerned, I think you can be reasonably certain it's a female. I think we should just. I think you should just relax a little, Tina. I mean, I'm old enough. I don't know if you are, but I am to remember the late David Bowie when he burst on glittering into the pop music scene. And if I remember right, and I might be wrong about this, I think it was Mary Whitehouse who took exception to his cross-dressing. But within a very few years, he was a superstar. What I'm saying is we should just be a bit tolerant and allow people to wear what they like and to live and let live.
If someone came to... Hang on a second, Tina. If someone came to your constituency surgery wearing the full face veil with only the eyes showing, would you ask them to take it off?
No, I wouldn't.
I'm a retailer. Ian, can I just put a slide?
Hang on a second. Let Alex answer that question first.
The straight answer to Ian's question is no, I certainly would not. I have to consider it insulting to tell any of my constituents how to... I remember it, and I criticised Jack at the time for doing that. I mean, listen, for an MP in particular, you are at the service of your constituents. And my constituents, within reason, as they say in LBC, can come into my surgery wearing what they like.
Tina, final comment.
I would not agree with you there. But
well, that's debate, Tina. And thanks for phoning.
Next one.
Next caller we've got, I think you've got that one, Ian.
It's Alex in Edgware. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Ian. I know you very well. Brilliant show, as always. Hello, Alex Salmond. Alex, meet Alex.
Alex, how you doing?
Right, end of this, Alex Love, and get on with your question.
You're a legend. You're a legend, Alex, mate.
Keep talking. You're doing all right.
Basically, my question is that with the publication of the Beckett report this week, was it the weak leadership of Ed Miliband or the way in which Conservatives successfully associated you and the SNP with the Labour Party that led to their election loss?
That's a good question. The two things are very connected, Alec. I think it was centrally the weak leadership of Ed Miliband. I'll tell you why. If he'd made that an advantage and said, look, we're going to have a progressive coalition against the Tories, and made the fact there were other parties prepared to join with him, then instead of being a weakness and being played against him and him shuffling about looking embarrassed in the campaign, it would have been a strength, because people would have said, well, there's not just Labour, there's other parties, the SNP, Plaid, the Greens, etc., are prepared to come in and put their shoulders to the wheel. So really it was Ed Miliband's decision, badly advised, I think, probably by the remnants of the Scottish Labour Party, to say no to that progressive alliance, and he defeated himself in the campaign.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alex. And I think that there was a lot of Middle England. I think that those images of Ed Miliband in the pocket of yourself that were splattered around. I remember it in Edgware area, many constituencies around London. It was everywhere, that poster.
But Alex, you kind of played up to that as well, didn't you? You kind of liked that image.
Well, I thought, the Tories actually put more pictures of me in London than of David Cameron. Probably wise. The last thing they should do is put in pictures of David Cameron. But there was the one, you remember the pickpocket one? I rather liked that one, because I thought it was like the milk tray man. The guy used to dive off cliffs, swim out to boats. It looked just like the milk tray man. I thought it looked rather dashing. So, let me just a wee bit of vanity. I thought that was okay.
Would you say that there's a number of reasons that the Labour Party just collapsed in Scotland, but the primary one was that they launched the Better Together campaign with the Conservatives? Was that what did for them? Because Margaret Beckett sort of hints at that in her report, but doesn't really say it's...
Well, it's a pretty mealy-mouthed report. Like Alec, who's obviously looked at it in some detail, I took a quick look at it, and I thought to myself, goodness sake, she's pulling her punches here. You'd think with the state of the Labour Party, they really could have benefited from a no-holds-barred assessment. But as you rightly say, there's a kind of broad hint that perhaps being in bed with the Tories isn't the best idea for political survival in Scotland. I think most folk in Scotland could have told them that a long time ago.
Well, let's move on. Let's recreate the Franco-Scottish alliance. Severin is calling in from Normandy. Hello, Severin.
Hello, Mr. Dale. Hello, Mr. Salmond.
Hello, Severin.
So I'm a master's student, and I'm doing some research about the relationship between the SNP and Europe. So here's my question, Alex. So how likely is it that there will be a UK referendum on Europe in June? And do you think that a majority of Scottish voters will vote to stay in?
Right, Seven. I think myself the referendum is more likely still to be September, but it's quite clear that a number of people in the Tory party, perhaps the Prime Minister himself, wants to go earlier than that. But I think September, for a number of reasons, is more likely. I think when it happens, it's going to be a very close result in the UK, and I think it's going to be a decisive vote for in Scotland.
Has there been any polling on that?
Yeah, this Sunday in the Sunday Times, Ian, there was a poll showing exactly that. Now, of course, given the other big report this week is why opinion polls get everything wrong. We shouldn't put too much stress on that. But on issue polling, they've got a better record than they have on party polling. And that's exactly what it showed. It's sort of very, very narrow lead for out in the UK, and an overwhelming lead for in Scotland.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people are slightly mystified that you bang on about Scottish independence, and yet you're quite happy to have the European Commission and the European Union actually effectively ruling over Scotland if you did get independence.
Yeah, I don't take the language. I think ruling over is a bit strong.
Well, 75% of laws are made in Brussels.
Yeah, well, look, let me give you another stat. 99% of taxation is not collected in Brussels. Now, I think political power is essentially control over taxation, right? Currently, Scotland controls about 15% of its tax base at the present moment. That's why Westminster has the big power. If Scotland were independent and independent in Europe, then we'd control 99%, and the only thing we wouldn't control is the VAT contribution, which is about 1%. So I think if you control 99% of your tax base, that's real power. So this stuff about the Commission ruling over all, yes, it has extensive powers, but that's not a reasonable description of the relationship.
So you want independence, but not total independence?
Well, I don't think independence and totally, in terms of being absolutely isolationist independent, is possible. no, I was going to say in the modern world, I don't think it was actually possible 100 years ago. All nations are interdependent, one upon the other. That's an obvious point. But you can have the maximum degree of independence within that wider interdependence.
But why not as part of a federal United Kingdom? I mean, there are steps towards independence, aren't there? And we are moving towards a federal system, aren't we now?
Well, I certainly hope we're moving to a more equal relationship. And federalism would have the advantage that formally it'd be a relationship of equality. The difficulty of federalism has always been that 90% of this federation of these four nations is in England, and it's very difficult to have an equal federation when there's a preponderance of one of the nations. But certainly it'd be an improvement on the current situation. But I'm really for independence here.
Well, don't forget you can watch us live on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk. Lots of your calls coming in, 0345 6060973. If you don't get through first time, do keep trying. Paul is in Hull. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Hi, what's your question?
Regarding what you just said about nations being independent there, I want to remember you saying that, everyone being the same, when it comes to student fees. Because you're all right for the English to pay full student fees in Scotland when you offer your own students it's free. How is that fair, and how is that the same and everyone being equal?
OK, well, Paul, in 2004, I went into the lobbies to oppose Tony Blair's attempt to put top-up fees on English students in England. So I went into the lobbies to try and stop the Prime Minister doing that. So I've been totally consistent. Yesterday in the House of Commons, I voted to stop the government taking away student grants in England for English students because I think everybody should be treated fairly. But where I had...
Why did you vote on that? I mean, should you, as a Scottish MP, have any vote on that subject?
Well, I was answering Paul's point first. My track record of voting for and behalf of English students, Paul, is better than just about any Tory or Labour politician in the House of Commons. But to answer Ian's point, the reason I justified voting on what could seem like a purely English matter is that there are consequences to abolishing or imposing tuition fees in England through the Barnett formula. And if you argue, and it certainly has proved the case, that you increase tuition fees so as you cut direct grants to universities, then that also cuts direct grants to universities in Scotland. And that's the justification and impact in terms of Scottish MPs voting. But, my heart is in protecting English students, and that's what I was doing yesterday. And incidentally, the huge constitutional issue yesterday was the first example of double voting. There was, believe it or not, going through the lobbies in the House of Commons, there was iPads that the clerks had, and they had to simultaneously count the number of English MPs and the number of English, Scots, Welsh, Northern-Irish MPs.
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, what went wrong was they missed out at least two who raised points of order and got very upset about it. I suggested to the very nice English Conservative who'd been missed out, incidentally, who's the quintessential English MP, incidentally. I thought he must have Scots or Irish ancestry. That's why they were trying to get at him by wiping him out of the Commons record.
Paul?
That didn't answer my question. How does he think, is it fair that the Scottish government will vote for English to pay in Scotland, but you won't charge your own?
Well, I was pointing out I've always voted against that, Paul. I've always voted for English students.
So essentially you agree with Paul, it is unfair?
Well, of course I think it's unfair, but, it wasn't my doing, Paul. It was the doing of Tory and Labour governments.
So why don't you change it? Well, it's within your power to do that, isn't it?
In terms of, the reason's very obvious, Paul, that if you had a situation where English students had to pay fees against my wishes and against my votes when they were studying in England, but had free education in Scotland, then there'd be no English students in England. They'd all be in Scotland. And obviously, neither the system couldn't bear that, but also there'd be no universities left in England.
When you've got French and German students, they don't have to pay, do they?
You offer free university fees to anyone from the EU countries.
Yeah, but that was one of the regular. Sorry, Paul. That was one of
single out the English. That's the point.
That was one of the regulations that Ian was right about. That was an EU regulation, which meant that was not within our province to decide.
Well, it is within your province to decide. You have the power to say, well, we won't charge English students if we don't charge French, German, Italian, Spanish students. Why should we discriminate against the English?
What wasn't in our power was the other European students. What was in our power, and I explained the reason for it. Listen, if we could have afforded to offer English students free education, we would have done so. But we can't afford it. But listen, could I say to Paul, absolutely, don't look for the fault here in the Scottish Government. When I had the chance, as First Minister, I abolished tuition fees in Scotland, which had been imposed by the Labour Party. Look to your own politicians the people like Tony Blair who imposed the fees in the first place, or the people like David Cameron who wiped out grants yesterday. Look to the people that you've elected. I'll give you the maximum support with my vote in the House of Commons, but don't blame me because the Labour and Tory parties have a downer on English students.
OK, Paul, thank you very much for your call. 0345 6060 973. And don't forget, you can watch us live on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk in glorious HD. Brian is in Glasgow. Hello, Brian.
Hi there, Ian. Hi,
Hello.
Alex.
Hi, Brian. How you doing?
I'm great, thank you. My question is on the Sarah Palin endorsement, and just to find out what you think about her backing Donald Trump to be president, and just to see if you're as worried as me about how things seem to be kind of going in his favour.
Well, before you answer, we, believe it or not, have a little clip of Sarah Palin. I think we should be playing this on a loop all day, every day. Let's hear it now.
Do you think this will do it?
You ready for a commander-in-chief who will let our warriors do their job and go kick ISIS ass?
I mean, hallelujah is all I can say to that.
Well, Brian, I think after hearing that, I think LBC listeners will be joining you in their concerns. You hardly needed a microphone there. I think it's an extraordinary combination, Sarah Palin and Donald Trump. I do think, as I said at the top of the show, it's the kiss of death for Trump as opposed to the dynamic duo. But one thing I would say about this quote, this kick-ass quote of Sarah Palin, if Donald would want to come on LBC and defend his offensive comments about Mexicans and Muslims and whoever else he's offensive about, then we'll kick some ass, Ian and I, if the Donald's got the guts to come on and get somebody answering back to him.
I mean, some might say that the reason he's so happy about her endorsement is that she is loved by the media. I don't know if she's loved by anyone else bar the media, and I think Ian pointed out there about how you get the sound bites all day long, and it's confusing why somebody who clearly doesn't have any kind of good message to send, why she gets so much attention, which is also going to spill into giving Donald Trump so much attention.
Well, you know something, Brian, they were in Iowa, where the first caucus is coming up in a week or so. And Iowa invented sliced bread in 1928. That's where sliced bread, and as you know, Brian, we have a saying in Scotland, the best things in sliced bread. Well, I think we can all safely say that the Donald and Sarah, in our opinion, are not the best things in sliced bread.
Oh dear, that's the kind of humour that we can look forward to every Wednesday at 4 on LBC. Do you think, though, that Donald Trump is chicken? Because we have invited him to come on to talk to you.
Chicken Donald is good.
Donald, that's a good one.
That's the sort of language. That's the sort of language that will bait him onto the show. Look, I think the Donald is a bit like some American heavyweights. That they pick their opponent and they'll make sure they don't come under the tough interview or they have people answering back. They're very controlled. I mean, the Donald tries to give this impression that he's totally off the cuff. In fact, his media operation controls him and protects him from tough interviews. And when he's had tough interviews, he hasn't liked it, and that's been pretty obvious. So I've got the feeling that he'll be loath to come on because both you and I would answer him back, just as he'd be loath to get interviewed by one of the top interviewers. But listen, if he doesn't come on, we'll keep challenging him, and maybe Chicken Donald will catch on.
Do you think he's afraid of that sort of confrontation? Because, I mean, it seems to me in his normal life, he rather revels in it.
Yeah, I actually do think that Donald is somebody who would have benefited a huge amount if somebody very early in his life had said no to him. He would have really benefited a lot. And
you could have said no to him over the golf courses.
and if I'd known 8 years ago what I know now, I would have done. But unfortunately, 8 years ago, but if you just take his political record, for example, 8 years ago, Donald Trump was a registered Democrat. He was opposed to the Iraq War. And in his previous run for president, believe it or not, he spent his time calling the Republican Pat Buchanan a Hitler lover and proposed a wealth tax in America. So there's been how shall I put it, something of a transformation.
So this
in
is all
the
an
Donalds.
act, basically.
Well, I think, that's why I disagree with people who call him a buffoon. I think this is a calculation. I think the things he says are a calculation to appeal to a certain section of American society, and I think Brian is spot on there. That's why it's so dangerous.
OK, Brian, thank you very much. Let's quickly go to Joe, who's in Settle in North Yorkshire. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, Joe.
Let you know, I'm a Labour member and I support Scottish independence, and I was in Scotland during the referendum, and I was devastated that you didn't achieve independence.
Well, thanks for that, Joe. Were you campaigning for a yes, or were you just observing?
Well, so I was only up for the days.
All right, Joe, what's your question?
My question is, do you feel the burn? Are you supporting Bernie Sanders' campaign for the Democratic nomination and hopefully to be the next president of the United States?
Well, I think it's very refreshing that there is a contest. And I think it's very refreshing that that point of view is being expressed in American politics. I'm right now, to tell you the truth, Joe, I'm for the person who'll beat Donald Trump. I really think that's the huge priority. Whoever's best placed to beat the Donald
who is that?
has my support. Well, I think that's probably Hillary Clinton, yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, because there's a recent poll out which puts Hillary Clinton, yes, admittedly she does defeat Donald by 6 points, but Bernie in a head-to-head defeats Donald Trump by 12.
Bernie Sanders is effectively the Jeremy Corbyn, isn't he?
But I wouldn't like to live on that difference, Joe. But listen, I'll tell you what, next time we have a referendum in Scotland, you come up for more than a day. That'll probably swing it for us.
Right, let's go to Sabrina in Croydon. Hello, Sabrina.
Hello.
Hi, what's your question?
Alice, if you were in Hollywood, a Hollywood star, would you actually boycott the Oscars?
Well, I tell you what, I thought you were going to say Hollywood at the start, Sabrina, but Hollywood, I think they've got a decent point. You know, when I saw that point, this is the point about no black actors being nominated for several times running, actually. And I thought initially, well, surely that's a wee bit much. But then I looked at the stats. I think they've got a point, and I think they're right to make the point very strongly, because it does seem extra. I mean, firstly, you should say that there aren't an equal representation of black people in films as a whole. And therefore, if you actually get to the situation that even that sample is underrepresented in nominations, then I do think the Academy Awards have got some questions to answer.
What would you do, Sabrina? Have you got a supplementary?
Well, I'm just leading on to that question. So your answer is yes, you would boycott.
Yeah, I would certainly consider it, hoping to force a change of heart in terms of how these things are organised, and a bit of soul searching on the part of the Academy Awards.
So I have another question regarding your SNP party. Do you think there's a lack of diversity within it?
Well, we do our best. I mean, the SNP, for example, is, we have, if you look at the diversity we have, and we have the first Muslim minister in terms of Humza Yousaf. We've got the first female Muslim member of parliament in terms of Tasmin Ahmed Sheikh. So there is a wide range. And certainly if you look at diversity in terms of background and employment, then the group of SNP MPs are just about the most diverse I've ever seen. For example, in terms of sexual preferences, I remember we're just newly elected, and somebody from the Daily Mail came up to me and said, did I realise that the SNP group had the highest proportion of homosexuals of any group in the Westminster Parliament? To which I replied, the SNP excels in all things.
Apart from BME representation, because you haven't, as far as I know, you've got no BME representation in Westminster.
You mean apart from Tasmin Ahmed Sheikh?
Okay, well, that's one MP out of 56.
Yeah, and we think both in terms of gender balance, where the SNP has been making substantial strides, Nicola Sturgeon's 50-50 cabinet, for example, and in terms of BME representation, we've got a substantial way to go, and we have action within our candidate selection to try and help that process along. One interesting feature that I don't think it's widely known, that the SNP obviously have a huge vote in Scotland at the present moment, hovering around 50%. But the stats show that among the Asian community, that support at the last election was well over 60%. So it does indicate there's a strong, diverse group of people behind the SNP.
Let's move on to Dee, who's in Chelsea. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Ian. Hello, Mr. Salmond.
Hello, Dee.
Mrs. Salmond, I'm a very, very huge fan of yours. I admire everything you have done and are still trying to do for the fantastic people of Scotland. I honestly think you are very...
Can we get to the question, Dee, please?
Don't, he's just getting on, to his game.
We haven't got much time left.
On you go, Dee.
Okay, here's my question very quickly, and correct me if I'm wrong. In 1997... just after the referendum for devolution of power to the Scottish people, you made a statement to the extent that you believe that an independent Scotland will be realized in your lifetime. Do you still believe this? And secondly, very quickly, if you were offered a safe seat on this side of the border, would that be something you will consider taking on? I for one, would campaign and vote for you.
Okay.
Right, Dede. Well, the answer to the first question is yes. Yes, I do. I think we're closer to independence than we've ever been. And the answer to the second question, I would normally have said, I can't. There's been so many requests like that in recent times. I don't think
you've actually had people asking you to stand in England.
Oh yeah, this was one of the. I think the biggest manifestation was after the big debate in the general election, where by all accounts, by every assessment, Nicola Sturgeon did so well. We had an absolute flood of people demanding that from England, demanding that the SNP put up candidates.
Would you ever think about that in the future?
I don't think it's a realistic prospect, given we're campaigning for independence.
There are quite a lot of people in the north of England, in Cumbria, Northumberland, who actually might sort of rather vote for SNP than Labour.
If LBC listeners think and demand that, then they're welcome to come on and persuade me on the matter. As of now, the answer's no, D-Day, but you never know. If people like you give me the full reasons, then we might give it a go.
And Dede, who do you normally vote for?
Labour.
And if the SNP stood where you live, what would you do?
I'll vote for SNP. I really.
So there you go. There's the demand is there.
Well, it's growing all the time.
Okay.
Thanks, Dede.
Dede, thank you very much indeed. But do you think that there would be people in the north of England who might well be more prone to voting SNP than maybe sort of a party led by an Islingtonian?
Well, I think that's a strong argument there. I mean, I think one of the problems. See, I quite like Jeremy Corbyn, and I always have. But there is a real issue for the German people.
Of course you do. He's doing very badly in the polls.
No, that's not the reason. I've liked him long before he was Labour leader. I think he's very principled in terms of international policy in particular. But there is a problem I think he's got with the people around him. It's not so much, in my view, the direction of his politics. It's more the geography of the Labour Party leadership, in terms that they look like they're coming from a very single part of the community, and they really have to breach beyond that. But there might be, our way forward. It was quite interesting. Go back to these debates in the election. Remember, there was the Green Party, Plaid, Nicola Sturgeon, 3 young women articulating a point of view, as a kind of progressive alliance. So maybe there could be an SNP type party representing all of the people of England.
I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about the Scottish elections that are coming up over the coming weeks. But do you think at the moment there is a severe danger for Labour that they could come third in those elections?
I don't think that'll happen, no.
Okay.
But is there a danger? Listen, we're all in danger in politics, but I don't think that'll happen.
Do you think that there could be some sort of alliance between the SNP and Labour on Trident, for example? I mean, in Parliament, you could have sort of alliances with them.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hope so, and I certainly hope the fact that the leadership is shifting position on Trident. Although I have to say, I don't agree with what was described as the yellow submarine argument. I don't agree with building the submarines.
No, that was
not putting
odd,
any missiles on them.
But
a straight vote against Trident, I think, would be good.
Have you or Angus Robertson, your leader in Westminster, have you had talks with Jeremy Corbyn or his people about the prospect of that?
Oh, there are definitely talks between the anti-renewal of Trident members of Parliament and how we can maximise the support against.
So the Tories were right, basically, before the election to warn of this sort of cooperation between SNP and Labour.
Well, they were right to be frightened, the Tories, of a cooperation between those of a progressive mind who don't want to waste £170,000 million over the next generation on a useless, redundant military plaything.
So when this vote comes up, there's likely to be a full-scale alliance between Labour and the SNP?
Well, that part of the Labour Party who are backing the non-renewal of Trident, certainly.
OK. Final call from Steve in the Highlands. Hello, Steve.
Hi there. Hi, Alex.
How are you doing, Steve?
I'm doing really well, thanks. Alex, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. On you go, Steve.
Good. The SNP has stated recently that it wouldn't tolerate Islamophobia, and that's really good. I really like that, Alex. But there's been a couple of your MPs that are quite vehement anti-English comments and anti-Semitic comments, and I'm particularly talking about Paul Monaghan and Sandra White.
Well,
and I'm wondering what you think of of those views.
Well, firstly,
because especially Paul Monaghan said this a few times, anti-English comments.
Okay, all right, let's get an answer from Alex.
Well, I don't accept that. I mean, the stuff on Paul, I think, was dredged up from years and years ago, and he gave an explanation for that in the context it was given. We don't tolerate anti-anything in the SNP. In fact, we just suspended a a counsellor recently for making inappropriate comments on the internet. So, obviously people will fall short from time to time. I would defend, incidentally, my parliamentary colleagues against the accusations you made. But nonetheless, if people make a mistake, then they'll be held to account for it. But the ethos of our party is we're not anti-people. We are pro-Scotland and pro-humanity.
Just a quick final question. We're going to be talking about the Falklands later on, Jeremy Corbyn's comments today. One of his aides has just said there should be a dialogue with Argentina about sovereignty with no preconditions. What's your view on that?
Well, you can have a dialogue, certainly, but you have to, given the history, say that the people of the Falklands would have to agree to any change in status.
Which they're never going to do, so there's no point.
Well, it depends what's offered. I mean, I'm all in favour of dialogue. I mean, there are advantages, of course, in getting on with your very next-door neighbour, that even given the history of this, that people in the Falklands might see. But you've got to reassure people that they're not going to have the ground sold from under their feet.
Alex Salmond, great to talk. It's great to have you in the studio.
It's a pleasure, Ian.
We will be back next week.
Drew, many thanks for your time. I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest you haven't encountered anything quite like this before in your legal career.
I'd have to concede that from the off. Yes, it was unprecedented.
What was most remarkable?